Anita, how's your mental health?
Questionable at all times. You know this.
Yeah, how's the mental health of your children?
Also a little bit tricky. Can I tell you my experience in trying to find therapists for myself and my kids, Mel?
Yes, please.
Okay, this is how it goes. You ask around your friends and your family for a referral for somebody who's nearby. You finally find somebody who sounds like they might work for your family. You give them a call and you find out that A, they're not accepting new patients, or B, they have a huge wait list. So you start over again and you ask people if they know anybody who would be a good therapist and a good fit. Finally, you find one, you go and you meet with them and you figure out that you don't actually like them that much. But it's been so much work to find somebody who you can go to in your area that you're kind of stuck with them. Well, do you have any ideas for how to get around this?
I do, because guess what? I've actually had some therapists that I have found on my own, which involves what you're saying. Sometimes I remember one time I was like 3 hours in the bathtub on my phone looking
Yeah.
through websites. I was such a prune at the end. But I have also had the experience with working with BetterHelp. And it was like, I don't want to say too good to be true, but because it is true, but it's like amazing because I was matched with my therapist within 24 hours.
And you didn't have to go through all of that other ridiculous process of trying to find somebody. And here's the cool thing too, is if that person didn't work out for you, you can just switch and say, and it's not like you're committing to another years long search for somebody who you're going to jive with.
It's true. And I lucked out, or maybe just BetterHelp is really good at matching people together because I never had to change my therapist. I loved her. Perfect fit for me. And I know that some of our friends have used BetterHelp and they've had to change therapists, and boom, same day, you can change.
Easy peasy.
You can ghost your therapist. Get a new one.
I love this idea. BetterHelp is one of our sponsors. If you use our promo code trybetterhelp.com/WWDN, you get 10% off your first month. And we totally recommend it.
Yes, get some therapy. That's trybetterhelp.com/WWDN. Anita.
Hi, Mel.
Hi, how's it going?
It has been a week.
Here, here.
Hear ye, hear. No, hear, hear. You're right. Not hear ye, hear ye. That's an announcement. Although we did make a big announcement.
We
this
did.
week.
Shall we reiterate the big announcement?
Yes, please do so.
Okay, everyone. October 15th through the 17th in San Diego, California. We are
presenting at Camp Widow. We're so excited about it. We were going back and forth about whether or not we were going to attend. And then, boom, we're going to attend not only just as people, but as presenters.
So if you are considering coming, come. If you can't come, we understand. But we would love to see you if you're able to come. And the only thing we can promise is that we're going to have a fun session. That's it. You probably won't learn anything.
But hey, that's what we've been doing this whole time. We have promised you no learning, nothing. Just
us.
Just us.
Which is maybe entertaining. Maybe it's fun watching the carnage. Who knows?
Come join us. It's also my anniversary that weekend, so that should be some interesting dynamics.
Oh,
Ugh.
fun.
Yeah, I'll just pretend it's not happening.
So that's a good high point of last week. All right, Anita, last week you told us about the baptism upcoming.
Yes, and it happened this week, and it was so hard. I think it was the second hardest thing after, like, the funeral that I've done. I have not been so upset and so sad and just so decimated in a long time. So it was really hard.
Second hardest thing after the funeral. That's a huge deal.
Okay, maybe the DCFS thing was also the worst, but this was different.
Okay, so
worst.
the CPS.
Yeah. It was very emotional, and I had lots of feelings. And it was also hard because, I just went into the bathroom and was crying my little eyeballs out. But for him, it was an exciting day, and so I was trying not to ruin it and be a total downer for him. And so I was just, like, crying, but trying to pretend like everything was fine for him too. So that was a little bit of a trick.
I have a new idea for a t-shirt for you.
Yeah.
Crying and trying. Or trying and crying.
In the bathroom.
In the bathroom.
I think we should, add that. So I am super relieved that it's over and done with, though. I did feel a weight lift off of me after it was done because I didn't have to anticipate it anymore. But in this case, the anticipation matched the actual day.
Yeah, interesting.
Mm-hmm. Annoying.
Now, how do you feel a few days later?
Relieved that I don't have to be anticipating it anymore and that it's done. And this is not something that happens like birthdays every year. This is like a one and done for him. So that'll be good. We'll have to do it again when my next kid is old enough though. But hopefully it won't be so raw.
4 years. That'll be in 4 years, right?
Yeah.
Well, congrats for surviving. Sorry about it. That sucks.
I was just going to say, there's just not really any way around it. The person that I want to be here, the person who was supposed to be doing this with our children is gone. And there's no fix for that. There's no replacement for that. There's nothing that makes it better. It just is. And it's stupid.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can give you some licorice and some donuts.
Yes, I'll take both.
Okay.
How about you? I know that you're having an interesting week. Right now, you're not where you usually are recording.
I know. Yeah, interesting is a good word. I don't really know. When you're in the middle of things, it's hard to kind of sift through it. So I'm kind of like, well, right now, I'm talking to Anita. And in an hour, who knows what will be happening. But yeah, I've been trying to make decisions that support myself in the best emotional way possible. And it's so weird when you and I both have kind of crisis things at the same time. We're just in this mode of like, okay, are you okay? No. Are you okay? No. Are you alive? No. But
bring donuts.
Yeah, gosh, I don't even know what to say about it. Interesting situation happening and layering grief on. Basically, grief plus anything else is so hard. And so I'm finding that I'm not able to handle extremely stressful and traumatic circumstances that are on top of what I'm already dealing with. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Speaking of trauma, guess what happened to me last night, Mel?
More trauma.
The police called me.
Who ran away this time?
Yes, I have the hardest time. I don't know if our listeners who have been notified of their loved ones' deaths by a police officer have similar issues to mine. But a policeman talks at me or looks at me and my heart just starts pounding and I get all sweaty and feel like I'm going to like fall straight to the floor. But yeah, my kids were at the park and they got separated from each other. And my son went and told a police officer. Like that was his fix for it. So the police officer called me and I was like, well, I know where that son is and I know where that son is, but they're just not together. And then the police officer hung up on me.
Oh, he didn't even say bye?
He was like, okay, fine, bye. Yeah, I mean, he was like annoyed that he was having to deal with this small problem that wasn't really a problem. Yeah. If that makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense.
But then I, for the next half hour, was like, calm down. Like, everything's fine. Calm down. It's fine. You're fine. The world's fine. It's fine. You're not in danger. Nobody's in danger. Nobody died. Everybody's alive. It's fine.
So, for the record, yeah, that's how you were notified of Jason's death. Also, you've had traumatic experiences with the cops because of said Child Protective Services incident that turned out to not be a thing. But
yeah, except for the cops weren't even involved in that one. It's just that I've had the cops show up at my door 3 other times since then for like random things. Like they said one of my kids called 911. Nobody would fess up to it. One time I don't even know. They just were like, just checking in on you. I don't know.
One time somebody wasn't wearing shoes and the neighbors called the cops on you.
Yes. And then one time one of my kids did get lost and the police found him. So do other people have these many run-ins with the police? Is it just me?
Anita, I've not had any. But I have no kids, which is appropriate for our topic today for our guests.
Yes.
So we're going to get to that in a little bit. But yeah, I think this is interesting because there's always an ongoing topic of widowed moms and kidless widows. And there are just different situations. Wouldn't you say? I mean, it's like I do not have kids, so I do not have to deal with helping children grieve their dad. I don't have to deal with them running away and the cops calling. I don't have to deal with all these stress. My situation is more like I'm alone. Everybody in my house died except for me. I'm isolated. I don't have those things that are stressful like that, but I have different things. It's interesting. We had a little conversation about that in our Widow Wives Club this week, and it caused me to think we are all widows, but vastly different stressors.
Yeah. And everybody, it's interesting because I think it's human nature to do the grass is greener. You know, if only I had this situation, or if only that were different about my situation, this would be easier. And I don't know that we can really ever prove that to be true, but it's how we're programmed somehow, that we just want to look at other people's situations and be like, oh, I'm sure jealous of that, or I wish I had that. I mean, I think all of us wish we had $1 billion. That's universal too, but whatever.
Well, sometimes like you wish that you had 0 kids like me, right? So you could have a nap. And sometimes I'm like, oh, if there were other things to focus on, I think I would be doing better. And then you might hear that and be like, you're insane.
Yeah. Yeah. And you might hear me say like, oh, I wish I had some alone time, and just think like, I wish I had a piece of Scott, or I wish I had something to live for, or to keep me motivated, or, you know, a tie to his family. Or, I mean, there's all sorts of, it's like you said, it's different situations. There's no better or best. It's just different.
Totally. And honestly, I've talked about this on our podcast before. This is not new. Also, there's no emergency, but I struggle a lot with passive suicidality. I learned about that term in therapy, and it doesn't mean I'm actively looking for ways for that. But when you wish you wouldn't wake up, or you're just like, oh, I'm still here, or you can get really, really low and really depressed and have problems. And like, I do struggle with that a lot. And it is a result of the isolation and me being just me, the lone survivor.
It's like there's nothing to tie you to the world.
No.
So why do you care about it?
Yeah, I constantly am making lists of things that I have the will enough to live for. And let me tell you, there are not many.
There is one major one,
Okay,
Mel.
you.
Bringing me donuts.
I know. It's true. And I have your top 3 down, so I will get on that order. No, that's why I have dogs. And I mean, doing the podcast is helpful because I know a lot of people are struggling in ways like I am, and also in ways like you are. And so us being part of the community, we get a lot of messages from people that say, thank you so much for putting this out. And also, I would like to say thank you to all of you for listening and for telling us that it's important. Because I think we're just in this unique situation together, and we help lift each other up, and we can all understand, various circumstances. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if anybody necessarily is going to envy how my feelings are. I just think it all sucks, and it's all unique, and it's all kind of the same at the same time.
Yeah.
But
same, different, same.
Speaking of community, you guys, yesterday was the Zoom hang. So we did something different this time as far as how to sign up for the Zoom hang. And it seemed to work pretty well so that the sessions were not overloaded, but that people were still able to just click on when they could. And so if you are in our Widow Wives Club, you will notice, we'll probably try it again next month, that we posted an announcement for the Zoom hang. It's every second Saturday of the month. And it's headed by our friend, the widow, Autumn Barker. She is a clinical, what's it called? Mental health counselor. Yeah. Anyway, so look for those around the second week of every month. We'll be posting the Zoom links. There are 2 sessions. And they had them yesterday. And from what I hear, they went well. So
yeah, neither of us were able to attend. I had a crazy day yesterday. It was festival days, so we were doing that all day long. And we thought about changing the day, and then we thought, it's not really about us. It's about you guys being able to be with each other. And so just keep it the same day, whether or not we were able to come. So thank you for those who did come, and thanks to Autumn for facilitating that. It's really helpful.
Yes.
So if you are interested in being able to connect with other widows and widowers, make sure you check out the Widow Wives Club, and also make sure you answer all of the questions. We realize that we're kind of a pain because we make you prove that you're a widow, but it's for good reason, and we just want everybody to feel really safe in there. And thanks to Julianne and Missy.
If you want to join the Widow Wives Club, it's on Facebook. It's also in all of our social media accounts on the links. So check it out. It's on our website, widowwedonow.com. Everywhere. We only have a few things. It's not that hard. But if you have a hard time, let us know. Speaking of support.
We're going to talk about bras now.
Oh my gosh, Anita, I just remembered something that happened this week.
What happened?
I have a story. I can't tell you all the details of the story for privacy issues, but there's an event that I partake in as participate in as a mentor and an arranger. And sometimes you get people who think they know better than you do about your job and the way the world runs because they're also in the entertainment business and things like that. And we had quite a bit of a snafu this week. I have to say it was actually a welcome distraction from my regular life, even though it was very stressful. But yes, it involved a famous person's people that I'm not allowed to say.
The famous person's people is one of my person's peoples too.
AKA Jason was a fan.
Yes,
so
was a big fan.
Anyway, there was some drama and I made a lot of memes out of it. So that's it. That was the high point of my week.
Sometimes we assume that unless we had a huge life insurance payout, we don't really need to know anything about investments or even finances. But guess what? A little knowledge of finances is critical for all of us. Maybe your partner was in charge of that stuff, and now you find yourself making all the decisions. Maybe you're mad about that. Maybe I am. Nicole from the He's Gone But the Money's Not podcast is here to help. She tackles financial literacy by telling the stories of women and widows and finance experts and shares the lessons they've learned as certified financial planners. Whether you know a lot and feel confident in your financial decisions or feel unsure about all of that stuff, there is more to learn. Listen and subscribe to the He's Gone But the Money's Not podcast on all podcast platforms. This ad was paid for by Rockhouse Financial, an SEC registered investment advisor. The high point of my week is I'm trying to buy a new car, but this is another issue, Mel, is finding your confidence and your ability to make decisions is harder when you don't have your person to bounce ideas off of.
And also, have you ever bought a car alone?
No. Why? Ew.
I do all the time. That's what single people do, Anita.
I know, but I don't want to because I hate talking to people and I hate the idea of negotiating. And now I have to make a decision and it makes me want to barf. And I have to keep telling myself, like, it's a car. Like, if you don't like it, you can get a different one. You know, it's not like I'm giving up one of my kidneys and I can't get it back.
Well, keep telling yourself that. And you have a life coach of a sister. She can help you.
Okay.
But I do have to say, if there is one part of your deal breaker that's not in there, I would understand that might be a stressful situation. I have to have heated seats.
Yeah.
Hands down. I don't care if my windows are automatic. I don't care if the car has tires. It just has to have a heated seat.
So I took the car that I was test driving to my dad's house, and I'm like, Dad, you want to come look at this car? And he comes out and he's like, well, it's got 4 wheels. And I was like, thank you so much for the help.
That is what my dad would say. That's really funny.
Yeah. He's like, it appears to have all of its parts. I'm like, it better. All right, Mel, we got to do our patron shout out.
Guys, do you know what a Patreon is? It's awesome. It helps us to keep the podcast going. It's optional, but if you consider supporting us, you get cool things. We have 4 tiers, and at certain tiers and up, one of the things that you get is a patron shout out, which we are going to do right now.
We're going to start with our dead husbands, and our secret dead husband says, somewhere over the window. Skies are blue.
Constance Dahlbach.
David Kelly.
Don Satterwhite.
Ivan Misner.
Kat.
Amy.
Amy Sapp.
Ashley Hahn.
Christina Shiflett.
Danielle Catterberg.
Not a Debbie Downer.
Dennis Brazo.
Jenny Taylor.
Jenny Wang.
Kathy Murray.
Kirsten Stromberg.
Laura Bradbury.
Leslie Webb.
Missy Schubert. Hi, Dorothy.
Rachel Barbosa.
Woo, woo, woo. Sarah Morris.
Sylvia The Shore.
Karen the Winehouse.
Anna Tracy.
Christina Scambato.
Christine Anderson.
Mindy Holmgren.
Dawn Barber.
Diana Becker.
Emily Toledo.
Emily Thornton.
Aaron Posick.
Gabe Lozano.
Ian Sini.
Ileana Bella Ruiz. Jump, jump, wickety, 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 whack.
Okay. Jamie Aliota.
Anita's mom.
Jenny Barrow.
Jocelyn Milo.
Joy Kirsch.
Katie Radcliffe.
Kara Scara.
Lori Farrington.
Marie Hoffman.
Marjorie Lewis.
Mary McGowan.
Peter Rukavina.
Sarah Kennedy.
Shannon Helm.
Sunshine Haven.
Tammy Schwartz.
Tara Wallace.
Val Packer.
And Ebony and Ivory Wendy.
Aww.
Together. Thank you to all of our patrons. We really appreciate your support. We're always so humbled that you guys seem to think that what we're doing is helpful.
Yes. We appreciate you. It helps us keep the podcast going. It helps us cover costs. It also helps Anita get a babysitter. And it starts as low as $5 per month, which is like
2 tacos at a cheap taco shop.
Or 1 taco. Yeah, taco stand tacos.
Yeah, street tacos. Tiny tacos.
Yeah. So, if you feel like you can forego 2 tacos a month, please
consider... 2 tiny tacos a month.
Please consider signing up for our Patreon.
Or if you want to buy us 2 tiny tacos, you can buy us a taco at buymeacoffee.com/WWDN. And yes, we actually go eat tacos.
Yes, it's true. Okay, this episode is awesome. This is a part 1 of 2. So this episode comes out on a Monday, and part 2 will be coming out this week on Thursday, because we had so many questions from our fellow widow friends for this guest that we needed 2 episodes. So stay tuned, and then check back in Thursday for another full-length episode.
Buckle your seatbelts. It's gonna be a bumpy ride. I'm Anita.
I'm Mel.
We're 2 young widows trying to help us and you figure out widow we do now.
This episode is sponsored by the Misner Family Foundation in memory of Elisabeth Misner.
Mel,
Anita,
do you want to introduce our guest?
Yes, we've been waiting for this day for a very long time, and this is a topic that a lot of people are really interested in joining the discussion on, and it is the topic of child grief. Our guest today is Kyndel Marcroft.
Clap, 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 clap. Cheers.
She is a licensed clinical social worker. We're so happy to have you with us today, Kyndel. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. This is actually a really fun topic. Not really fun,
yes,
but fun to talk about because there's so many kids. I mean, kids are often called the forgotten grievers, right? And so there's so many parents that in their own grief, they don't really know what to do with their kids. So I'm really happy to be here.
Like 100% of us, I think, are like,
oh,
what do we do with these people?
Because kids, like parents, don't even know what to do with their kids when they're not in grief, right? Isn't that the thing?
Right, because there is no manual. There is no manual. I don't know if you guys got the memo, but there is no manual.
How did you get into working with kids with trauma?
You know, I have been in the field for over 20 years. I graduated from the University of Utah in 2000, the year 2000. Ooh, it was almost the end of the earth, but not quite. End of the world, but not quite. And I actually really quickly discovered that I really loved doing play therapy and loved helping kids relax and kind of regulate, and start to identify what emotions are and where they feel that in their bodies, right? And then be able to talk about and normalize those experiences for kids. And I thought, I got trained in sand play therapy, and um, just enjoyed working with kids tremendously. And then ended up working for Intermountain EAP. So we worked with like the children of employees, right? Employees of all Intermountain facilities, and then their children or their dependents. And so we did a lot of family work, and I did adults, individuals, couples, and have since gotten really into and been trained in EMDR, which is called eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's a therapy that we use for people who are kind of stuck in their trauma, with PTSD, often symptoms. And yeah, so that's how I got it. That's how I got here.
Oh man, that is so fascinating. I've done EMDR for myself. I mean, I did not practice it on myself. You know what I mean?
You have, yes, I hear you. Yes.
Yes, after Scott, my husband, died, I did EMDR with my therapist. It was very helpful. And I've been curious on how this is approached with kids. I actually didn't even think about if that was something that kids were able to have done on them until recently. So, can you tell us a little bit about the developing brain and doing EMDR? That was one thing that I was having a question on, was because they are kids and they're developing, is it helpful?
Oh, 100%. In fact, kids, because they haven't started, younger kids particularly, and then as we move towards adolescence, it changes, but kids particularly are very fast healers. So the brain is set up to heal, right? It is set up to heal, just like the rest of your body. When I go do presentations at different community events, I always say, hey, who here has a brain? Right. And everybody is like so excited to raise their hand, which I'm glad about, because that would be unfortunate if they didn't. But they're all laughing. And I'm like, then you have mental illness.
Mic drop.
This is, if you have a brain, you have mental illness, right? And so because your brain is not separated from your body, and your body gets sick. And sometimes your brain gets sick too. And so when it comes to children, they're incredible healers because they don't have as many layers of defenses, right? They haven't had years of practicing defensive and self-regulatory behaviors, right? So they are quick to heal. They're quick to trust, usually in session. And EMDR with kids is actually extremely successful.
That's amazing.
Yes.
Very cool.
Is.
Can we just talk about how rigorous sand tray therapy training would be? I mean, this sounds like the worst idea ever.
I think it sounds like the best.
Come play in this sandbox, guys. It's going to be terrible. It's going to be so hard. You may not survive it.
Yeah.
So much fun.
You know what? It is a lot of fun. And to get trained in sand tray, obviously you have to experience it yourself, because you're right. You're sometimes the therapist, and sometimes you're the client in those situations where you're getting trained. And I can tell you that sand tray therapy is actually there's a difference between sand tray therapy and sand play therapy. Sand play therapy is what I was trained in. It's a little more open-ended, not so restricted, is in terms of therapy. But it is an opportunity to take what is inside your head and put it outside, right? Which feels a lot less overwhelming for most people. And sometimes I'll even use sand play with adults, right? Because sometimes adults get caught up in feeling overwhelmed with whatever it is that they're experiencing, those emotions, and to put it out in front of them and let them manipulate those characters and those things outside of them is often really healing, right? And it's less overwhelming, right? They can create solutions that maybe they couldn't have created if it had stayed in their brains.
How does it work?
So sand play therapy is, you have a sand tray, And I have them over here. I was going to show you, but I know we're on like sound. But it's a certain size. There's an exact size of sand tray. It's a certain prescribed size based on Carl Jung's work. And you have sand in it, and then you have all of these real life toys and figurines that the child can go and say, okay, I'm going to pick this, and this. I'm going to pick what I'm drawn to, and then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to create a world or a story in the sand, right? And they get to create it. They get to take their time. I'll often let them use water, right? Which is so fun. And they get to like play with the mud and the dirt, and they get to get dirty, and it's super fun. It's really an experiential type of therapy. And they have an opportunity to create and then share, right? And as the therapist, it's actually really positive to see that happening. Now, what's cool is that you can use EMDR with sand play. So we can use multiple modalities to help a client move and heal.
So everybody just let's go see Kyndel, and it will all the problems will be solved. So we actually asked our Widow Wives Club, we polled them and asked them what they wanted to know about, if they got to ask the therapist about their kids and grief. And we asked them a bunch of questions, and they submitted their responses. So a lot of the questions we're going to be asking you today have come from our group of parents, things that they are struggling with and things that they wanted to know. So that's kind of where we're coming from with the questions from the trenches, real world. Yeah. And I feel like they came in three different kind of categories. And the first set of questions was geared more towards the teenager, older kids who maybe are not actually kids anymore. I don't even know what to call them anymore, but and my kids are screaming right now.
This is the episode where it's appropriate.
Par for the course. Anyway, kids who are a little bit older, who are definitely experiencing grief, who can kind of understand that they're experiencing grief, and are sometimes really hard to deal with because they do get to make their own choices to a certain extent.
Right.
Yeah. So one of the things that people wondered about is, how do you deal with kids who are resistant to doing formal therapy or just won't talk about it at all? How can you help them if they don't want help?
That's actually a great question, right? So I have read into that quite a bit, because some people end up bringing their kids in and the kids aren't real excited to be there. And we have in therapy a thing called a readiness ruler, where is the client ready? Is the client ready to work on the stuff they need to? How motivated is the client for change? And grief is different. It's not like there's a behavior that needs to change necessarily. It's these emotions that are really overwhelming and big, and it feels like in the body, like if you open it up a crack, it's going to take over sometimes, right? And teens are super self-conscious because most of them feel very isolated and alone anyway, right? So then you add grief to that process, and their brains go right into survival, right? So they're either hyper aroused or hypo aroused. So hyper aroused is super anxious, hyper vigilant, angry, acting out, and even it could look like stomach aches for some, right? Whereas, yes, hypo aroused is really shut down, depressed, isolated, withdrawn, right? So the goal is really to help kids and adults really move towards their window of tolerance. That's kind of in the middle. We want that window of tolerance to be wide, so that when things happen and the wind blows in the world, in their lives, that they can manage it without kind of going into crazy zone or shutdown zone, right? So these kids, because of the grief, because of the death of a loved one, a parent usually, or a sibling, these kids really struggle with communicating what the overwhelming feeling is in their body and what they're experiencing. And so there is a lot of resistance. Teens in particular are very resistant, right? Although it is becoming more and more popular for kids to get therapy, right? So just a couple of ideas, right, that I have is do family grief work, right? Don't send the teen by themselves initially, right? Is as a family, we're going to go do this. Let the child, the teen, start to build a relationship. Pick a therapist that you feel like the teen will connect with, and have that teen start to build a relationship with the therapist that isn't focused on them, that is maybe focused on the family's experience and the family's grief. So I thought about maybe doing some family work, right? Being able to work through some of the grief together, right? And talk about it together and see if the child can at least sit in a room where these hard things are talked about and be given an opportunity to share, right?
That's a great idea. You win the podcast.
Oh,
Congratulations.
sweet. I didn't know there was a race. I should have brought the runners, my Nikes. I'm kidding. Okay. So the other thing I thought of is being able to, let's see, I had written a couple of ideas down on this because I feel like one of the other things that needs to be done is that oxygen mask analogy. You guys have heard it a billion times, is that often the kids are watching you and your response to grief, right? They're playing off your emotions. And so if you're struggling, maybe you getting help and you talking about the help you're getting and being open about your experience and how hard things are, but also like I also felt relief talking about the positive things that you're getting, talking about the hard things, but not relying on the child. Do not ever rely on your child to process your grief. Share, but don't process.
What does that look like?
Yeah, can you tell us more about that?
Yes, I have a lot of kids who end up taking on, particularly after the death of a parent, end up taking on a parental role, right? Usually these are older teens that might have younger siblings. They end up taking a lot of the responsibility because they need to, right? But what also happens is the parent, the surviving parent, starts to parentify the adolescent child, right? And that is really just too much, right? And you're going to have a child who is going to crack at some point. Okay. So what I encourage you to do is you get help. You put the oxygen mask on, you work on your stuff. And as you work on your stuff and you work on healing, your child will see that, will feel the vibrations of the healing and the energy and be able to create some of that change, be able to crave that and maybe move towards that themselves.
That's something that we really struggle with at our house. Is my oldest daughter's 14 and then she has 3 younger brothers, and it's so hard because it's like there's this on off switch with me and her. It's like, I need your help. No, you're not the parent, but I do need your help. So it's kind of, she's like, well, what am I? Am I your helper? Am I, and I'm like, you're not a parent, but I do need your help. And so it's a hard balance for her. And I think often she feels like she's her head is spinning. I don't know what my role is.
Who am I in this family now?
Yeah. And I'm always like, you're not the parent, don't try and discipline your brothers. And she's like, okay. And then I'm like, okay, I need you to watch your brothers. And she's like,
Right. It's so confusing. And so getting that straight in your own head first, kind of, and creating a plan and trying to be as consistent with that as possible, right? You're human. You're going to need her help.
Yeah.
Right. But I love that you're kind of saying to her, you're creating a different language. You're not the parent. I do need your help with this, but I will handle this. Does that make sense? So I love, Anita, that you're doing that, because I think that language is helpful to kids too, that there's a boundary here. I'm still in control. I'm still in charge. You're safe, but I need your help. And I need your help.
And that goes towards another question. And that is, sometimes I try and extrapolate what she would look like, what her behaviors would look like had dad not died. And I often find myself saying, like, is this normal teenagerhood, or is this something that's beyond that because of her situation? Like irritability. And I know I talk to a lot of people and they're like, oh yeah, that's just teenage girl, but I'm like, but where do we cross the line of normal development and those types of things? And when do we know that it's grief and some of those complications that have come from losing a parent? And did that question make any sense at all?
It did, and I get that. I think that the answer is complicated because, first of all, I'm going to.
No,
I know.
Oh, wait. Here's what you need to know, Kyndel.
Okay, tell me.
Anita's a physical therapist and she loves linear, very clean explanations.
Yes.
I'm a musician and everything's a discussion. So
you're like, I love the
Anita,
richness of it, right?
I also just want an easy answer because it's too stupid hard, and I'm just mad about it a lot.
Well, oh, totally. And that's again, Anita, part of the stages of grief, right? So I want you to assume, I know we're not supposed to do that, right? But I want you to assume that your kid is grieving, that a lot of the behavior is going to be seen through those glasses of grief. Now, she is a teenager, and that does play a part. And when teens are developing their brains, if you listen to The Whole Brain Child or read that book by Dan Siegel, you can gather that kids' brains from ages about 11 to about 25 are developing. They're pruning the things they don't need, and they are instilling and growing those parts of the brain that they do need. Okay, so there's a lot going on for kids, and there is a lot of like irritability, just naturally, hormones involved, right? But if you think about it in terms of, I call it trauma-colored glasses. Now I'm holding my glasses up to kind of show you guys, and those who are listening, I want you to imagine a set of glasses, right? This set of glasses represents your experience of your parent dying. And so when a parent dies, a teen and a child and a surviving spouse put those glasses on. And we are seeing everything in our present through those glasses, through that lens. So yes, of course, it's going to affect you. Yes, of course, it's present. But it's present, and it's also part of being an adolescent.
So what kinds of behaviors, though, I often find myself asking, like, what kinds of behaviors need to be quote unquote dealt with or worked on, and what things are just more like
working through,
or working through, or just like, this is just normal for a teenager, and I don't need to have alarm bells going off.
So let's talk about some of the red flags, right? I think that's what you're talking about, right? So some of the red flags that I'm paying attention to are excessive isolation, right? Some isolation is normal, but excessive isolation really looks like you can't get the child out of their room. They're spending a lot of time on the computer. They're spending a lot of time by themselves. They're not communicating with friends. They've really withdrawn, right? And that's when we know that there's some depression happening. An inability to concentrate, right? Poor grades. Okay, a drop in grades. So what I'm talking about is
all of these things. I'm like, check.
Yes. So poor grades are an indicator. Like if your kid kind of constantly has, I hate using even the word poor grades, because it's just like, if your kid's grades are lower and that's how they've always been, it's not a red flag. But if your kid is an A or B student and is starting to get D's and F's, that is a red flag, right? That is an indicator, and it's information. It's not bad. It's not wrong. It's just information. And we don't need to shame our kids around some of those losses. Okay. We just need to kind of create what I call a circle of support, right? Around those things. So acting out behaviors like drugs and alcohol, or over permissiveness sexually, those are big red flags, right? The child usually is trying to regulate their internal world. Okay, all this chaos has happened. We have the death of a parent, which is really dysregulating emotionally. And in order to heal it, let's say a child experiments and smokes pot with friends and has a momentary relief of having to feel the pain of grief. And that's when kids kind of can get looped in to those things. And honestly, surviving spouses, because we just want to solve the pain. We don't want to feel the pain. right? So kids, sometimes those are red flags. We need to get them help immediately, right? To sort of figure out, how can I regulate in healthy ways, right? Versus the unhealthy ways, right? So child that expresses a lot of guilt, or sense of over responsibility, like it's my fault. Now, because kids are extremely egocentric, so that means that they're in the middle here and they feel like the world revolves around them. And so even with the trauma colored glasses, right, or grief colored glasses here, the child believes often that maybe the reason the parent died was because they were a bad kid, or maybe they did something wrong, or maybe it was part of the situation. They feel guilt, right? Could I have done something different? Right? So being able to help, address those and help the children from the get-go really know, like, this is nobody's fault. This happened to us. We're going to get through this. We'll get through it together. It will be okay. It's not okay right now, but we'll be okay.
How would you help a teen that has anxiety?
So anxiety, again, is that dysregulation, right? Internal dysregulation. It's that hyper aroused part. So when I talk about the window of tolerance, hyper arousal and hypoarousal, I'm referring to a theory called polyvagal theory. So polyvagal theory, so the vagus nerves connect to the brain and basically the central nervous system, and they connect the central nervous system to the rest of the body, right? So we're looking at this polyvagal theory, and that is that when the central nervous system is activated, right, that we're in hyperarousal. When it's shut down, we're in hypoarousal, and our body is in hypoarousal, right? So hyperarousal is that like quick breathing, sweaty palms, sweaty pits, right? Like upset stomach. That's often that hyper aroused state. Okay. Irritability. Irritability is a big sign of anxiety in kids, right? I feel dysregulated. I don't know what to do with it, right? So therefore it's going to come out at
So
you.
I'm going to be a jerk.
So I'm going to be a jerk, right?
Never happened at this house. Never, ever.
No. So those are some things to kind of watch for. But anxiety itself is not wrong or bad. There's kind of a spectrum, right? There is kind of this dysfunctional anxiety that stops us from being able to function and live our lives in the way we would like. So this is distress and anxiety. And here's kind of what I call eustress. Eustress is that it motivates us. It gets us out of bed in the morning. I mean, both of you guys probably got out of bed with an alarm, right?
Yes.
Ish. So in that moment, did you feel a little anxiety when the alarm went off?
Every day. Yes. I wanted to stay where it was warm and soft.
Yes. I was having a bad dream last night, though. So I was like, oh, I'm going to wake up because then I can stop having. I was in Mexico getting like kidnapped, you guys. So.
Oh, good. I thought you were going to say you were going to get the COVID shot. And I was like, oh, no. In Mexico, get it. Yeah.
No, I was kidnapped. Worse than the COVID shot in Mexico. Anyway, continue.
Again, so you were probably in hyperarousal, right?
Yes, already.
Right. So kids are going to respond to life's stuff with hyperarousal sometimes. It's a normal part of our lives, right? But we often have kids, especially with the death of a parent, I feel like it shakes that up, right? And it makes it so that they're kind of chronically in hyperarousal, right? The world is not safe. I am not safe, right? So here we start to build a lot of negative beliefs. How, again, I'm seeing the world through my glasses of grief. The world is not safe. I am not safe. People die. Okay, that's big. I might die. Okay, so do you see the brain starts to make some links, right, that maybe aren't necessarily there. So those are some things to be thinking about. So kids with anxiety, they really look like your normal kid, except for they're going to have upset stomachs. They're going to be hypervigilant to take care of you. If I take care of mom and her emotions, then things will be better here, right? So you might have people pleasing kids, right? That try to make everything better for you and help you avoid conflict or problems. Okay. So yeah, there are some things that kind of, and it's nobody's fault. And again, it's not wrong or bad. I really don't like the language of good or bad. I really like the language is it working or is it not working? Sometimes it's working and sometimes anxiety does not work, right? Stops them. And if they are struggling, I mean, that's time to get them some support and help. Yeah.
So, Kyndel, you have been a therapist for 20 years. I've been teaching piano for 20 years and I've taught kids. And I want to know if you have noticed differences with the advancements of technology correlating with kids' anxiety over the 20 years.
That is a loaded question. And the answer is probably in short, yes.
That's what I've noticed too. I'm just curious.
Yeah. Yeah, because there's so much. I mean, the other piece is one of the things that's very regulating to us as humans is each other. Okay. So, how kids learn from birth to regulate is through a caregiver that is attuned and connected. Okay. Because the two greatest things that we need as humans is connection and belonging. Right. And it comes out of this attachment. And so, here's this little baby, and they get love and affection from their mother. Okay, or their father, whoever that primary caregiver is. And they learn over time that when they have a need, they get distressed, and an attuned parent meets that need and they can relax and their body regulates. Does that make sense? And that happens over and over and over again and creates a healthier adult. Okay, so when kids, over the years where we've gotten all this great technology, there's so many great things about it. I love having my whole life, like all the contacts I need on my phone, right? I love having my email. I love having all that. But the problem is our kids are socializing often on their phones. They're socializing on computer games, which means they're not getting the connection, the human connection. So when we are connecting and we're looking face to face and we're in the same room, if we were to take a CT scan of both of our brains, our right hemispheres would be lit up. That is often regulating, right? So we're looking at a generation of kids that have learned to regulate in parentheses, quotations, by the phone. But they're not really getting regulation, which keeps them in hyper arousal, right? They can't ever relax, right? And these social media platforms continue to perpetuate that. Now, I'm not saying, throw it all out, right? I'm not saying that because it's not going to happen.
Let's go back to the 1800s where we only drink sarsaparilla.
And we use the restroom outside in a hole.
Oh, thank goodness we don't do that.
I'm out.
Yeah, because we're not ever going to go back.
Yeah.
Right. So we don't want to vilify it, but we do want balance. Right. Yeah. And we want to provide our kids at least the best we can opportunities and experiences for connection. Real connection.
Which COVID has not helped with, might I just say, because we just can't see people.
Right.
Even. I gave somebody a hug today and I was like, what is this? And it felt good. I was like happy to give that person a hug. So yeah, hasn't happened in a while.
We are wired for connection.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's probably, this global trauma of COVID has affected all of us in that way. Yeah, right. The two basic needs, connection and belonging. Well, we haven't been able to do that with each other.
Ugh. You're just connecting to the internet and belonging in your room, hiding.
Yeah.
Wrong kind.
Wrong kind. I have an impossible question for you.
Oh, okay. Shoot.
So you talked about your grief colored lenses.
Yes.
Do those soften the color or the darkness of them? Does that soften over time to a point where, you talk to an adult whose parent died as a child, and I don't know that I would say it colors their decisions that they make as an adult. I mean, if you talk to them, you wouldn't even know that that was their experience unless you specifically asked them. Do you know what I'm saying? So I'm wondering if it eventually goes away, or if it diminishes over time, or if it's always going to be there for them.
That is a fantastic question, and it's not impossible, because the truth is that unless we work to heal those glasses, to heal those experiences in our lives, they do stay with us. Right? When we have the death of a parent, it's not something we see. Again, here's our brain at work. Our brain has a virus, and it comes out periodically, but we don't see it very often, right? And it does apply, right? So I've worked with a lot of adults who had a parent die in childhood, who still feel abandoned or feel like it was their fault, or there's something I could have done, right? And have carried a belief with them into adulthood, right? So it's not, and this is not, I probably just like put a guilt trip on all the moms that are listening. And I'm not meaning to do that, because honestly, there's nothing, this is life. This is the experience of life, right? You didn't choose this. None of you did, right? Kids didn't choose this. However, there are some consequences when these things happen. And so to be able to deal with them and work through them. So that's why it's a good idea to do some family therapy. It's a good idea to talk about these things, to allow emotion, right? To allow whatever emotion needs to be present, right? During these grief experiences. And then we can create some healing, right?
I've been reading about just the long-term effects of trauma on children. I mean, they've studied children that were in the womb of Holocaust survivors. They've studied children that were in the womb of 9/11 sufferers. And they have huge effects that they've documented. So, and I know I mean, this is just my own like normal person in the world experience with people that have had maybe abuse in their childhood, and that stuff sticks with you. And what I've seen just from like a lay person is that the trauma is there if they don't address it, and they just continue to like layer on top of it, and it does affect them. And there are things that need to maybe be addressed when they get to adulthood.
Absolutely.
Is that true?
That's absolutely true, right? Because there's a book I'm listening to right now that came out. It's called "What Happened to You."
Yes.
And are you listening to that? Have you seen it? Bruce Perry and Oprah Winfrey. And it explains what Bessel van der Kolk. So Bessel van der Kolk wrote "The Body Keeps the Score," and it's a good read, but honestly, it's kind of like wordy, right?
It's like clinical.
It's very clinical. But if you're really interested, it might be kind of cool to pick up this book, because it explains this exact concept. So, and it's not to scare us, it's really to say, hey, we hold on to these experiences. We are a human being, and our experiences make up our future, right? And so we make choices in those experiences. But, when you have a parent die, sometimes one of the results is that you don't let people get close, right? Somebody's going to leave you. People die. That veil of like, oh, nothing bad ever happens, is not something you can hold on to when that happens to your family, right? So these are things that need to be dealt with, right? And the maladaptive part of those things, it's my fault, or maybe I had something to do with this, or I could have done something different, right?
Okay.
I have a question about that book.
You have so many questions.
Okay, I have another question since you brought up that book. So I just got to the part where they talked about how an infant that has trauma or abandonment in the first 2 months of life is more at risk long term for an infant that has a good first 2 months of life and then has trauma.
Right.
Is that true?
It is true.
What?
So there have been studies done. I know, it's so disturbing, right?
No, it's really good news for me, because I feel like all I have to do is 2 months of good work, and
And we're good.
And I'm off the hook.
It's bad news. Now I feel like I have to go hold the babies in the orphanages for
I
2
know.
months.
Well, so this is an interesting piece, and I would have to, I mean, this is from my history of knowledge, and I don't have the exact research right in front of me. So take it as a soapbox thing. But research has been done on children's brains. And so between the ages of birth and 9 months, your limbic system is developing. And surprise, surprise, the limbic system is your fight or flight system. Okay, so if I don't get what I need, and that's what I was talking about with that attachment, right? That caregiver, you have a need, you have a wet bum, you cry because you can't communicate any other way. The caregiver, the attuned caregiver, changes your bum, holds you, pats your back, helps you, cuddles you, and you can relax, right? But those children who don't get that, so from the ages of birth to 9 months, they don't get that. The limbic system does not develop appropriately, right? Because you're correctly, right? You have different parts of the brain. So here's you guys have probably seen Dan Siegel's stuff. So he talks about the brain being like the fist. Okay, so if you make a fist with your hand and you put your thumb inside that fist, okay, the outside of the fist represents your prefrontal cortex. Okay, so prefrontal cortex, and the cortex makes us human. This is where the prefrontal cortex is where good decisions can come. This is where problem solving, connectedness, right? Attachment, that comes from here. The limbic system is inside. These are little structures, the amygdala, the hippocampus, the hypothalamus. These are all smaller structures inside the brain that create either fight, flight, or freeze responses. These are survival mechanisms of the brain. Animals have these, reptiles have these, right? And then there's another piece, which is the brainstem, which is that freeze, right? And that's what reptiles have. That's how reptiles survive. So as humans, we have all of these different areas that affect us and that we can draw from to create safety for ourselves and problem solving and connection. And what happens in those first 0 to 9 months, boom. If that doesn't get developed right, you end up with a kid who is incredibly anxious all the time or incredibly angry and acting out. Okay, so kind of interesting. Yes, very interesting.
I was shocked.
Yeah.
Can we put a pin in that? Because that leads us into talking about the little guys that we had lots of questions about too. But before we get there, I want to ask about, so we've talked about how useful it is to have therapy, to work through some of these issues for the older kids. But if they really aren't willing to talk about it, number one, are there any resources, books, or podcasts, websites, things that parents who have teenagers who aren't willing to seek professional help that they can use to maybe prepare themselves to be more helpful for their children, or any tricks that you have for getting your kids to open up and at least talk to you if they're not willing to talk to somebody who's a professional?
That is a good question. There are actually a lot of books. So if you Google grief and children, you can get a whole slew of books that are actually I don't know how good they are for teen children, but really from the latency age, so young to latency, you've got books that have like art, they're all like illustrated, and they talk about grief and they talk about it in metaphors, right? And so those are all helpful. When it comes to working with teens, I actually don't know of any specific books that are great for teens, but creating a safe, again, doing your own work, right? If you're struggling, help yourself to create a safe place so that your kids can talk about your grief, not to get therapy from them or sympathy, but just be like, this is what I'm experiencing. This is a normal thing to experience. We as a family talk about this as it happens. So you're normalizing the experience of grief. I like to kind of I worked with a couple of teens on grief. Their father died, And I went into the home and I did a family meeting with everyone. And we talked about the stages of grief. And I went around and had everybody share, like, have you noticed isolating, not wanting to talk to people? Oh, yeah. Well, how did that go for you? Tell me about that. And so, opening up and saying, yeah, everybody has and is in a stage of grief. You're not different. I'm not different. I'm with you. I am you. Does that make sense in that way? So as far as some resources, there's a book called Helping Teens Work Through Grief by Mary Pershey. And this like helps with group activities for helping teens deal with grief. It helps you use different things like clay or painting, experiential things that help you deal with grief. There is also a book by Linda Goldman called Raising Our Children to Be Resilient, a guide to helping children cope with trauma in today's world. And then there's a book called Breaking the Silence, a guide to help children with complicated grief. And that's also by Linda Goldman. So those are some options.
I love that. Oh, Mel ran away.
Oh, see you, Mel.
That's not typical. I'm the one who usually runs away. Okay, so let's remember when we put a pin. Oh, she apparently has. Do you have that book?
Therapy Games for Teens by Kevin Gruszewski.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, this book, it looks really cool because it's fun ideas to connect, build rapport, spark conversation, and Kevin, it has his work history in here and where he got these things from. But yeah, it looks really good. I was looking through it and it's like they take you through like step by step things that you can do to have ideas to get them to like be comfortable and then assess things or like pro tips, what do you do if they don't respond? So
what do you do?
There's anger management. Ooh. Anita, maybe you need this book instead of me. I just like reading things for fun. Why do you
have this book and I don't?
Everything that I read for fun is like a college textbook or something like that. I just am strange. Let's be honest.
It comes from teaching kids piano for 20 years.
I know. Well, there's so much of it. I'm like, this is not even teaching piano. This is psychology. So like,
it is. Oh. It is.
Look, trauma flashbacks. This book even has stuff with trauma flashbacks. Trauma triggers
and triggers, right?
Yeah,
I love that.
So Kyndel, what do you think about when a teenager acts like or even says that they're quote over it and they don't need anything from you anymore about it?
Right. Well, like I said, they're not ever over it. They're not over it, right? What that is, it's code for over it, in parentheses, is code for this hurts too bad to talk about, so I won't. Right. And you do want to give them space because chasing a kid into a corner and forcing them to talk is never a good method, and they won't talk, right?
Chasing a kid into a corner is a good way to get kicked.
It is. Yeah. Not a good, happy thing. Right.
Right.
So it is something that you want to give them space for. And you say things like, you know what, help me understand what it is that you're feeling. Just open-ended questions. Help me understand. And if they don't want to share, say, I'm here when you need. I'll give you the space you need. And just so you know, I'm here when you need. And if you don't want to talk to me, we'll get the tribe in here, because I think that's another important thing with adolescents, particularly. There was a study done by a guy named Ross Gray. He says 40% of the teens questioned report that the most helpful person in dealing with loss was their peer. Right. And so that tells you something, is creating a circle of support, a tribe of peers and people like friends and family. Okay. Friends and family and peers of this child, eliciting support for your family, for the child, is really important, particularly with peers or with adolescents.
Yeah.
Right.
So my kids all go to the Sharing Place, which is a grief support for kids. And I love that idea because like my daughter sometimes is like, why do I need to go here? You know, that was way more snarky than I should have made her. And I apologize to her. But there is this power in taking the parent out of it and finding people your own age to kind of rely on and lean on and talk to openly without worried about what it's going to do to mom or how she's going to
Right.
react or
Yeah.
all of those things.
Or trying to protect you, right? Which is they're tuned into because they feel your energy too, and they don't want to be the cause of your pain. And even if they talk about it and you start to cry, even though they're not the cause of your pain, they feel like they are.
Yeah.
Right.
Grief. No.
Yeah.
Here's a sandwich. Eat a sandwich.
Which is not good either to be soothing with food, because then we get into a whole host of other problems too.
Well, food is actually really soothing, and it helps, ground and regulate, right? That's what food is. And you're right, though, it can become negative.
You could only soothe with kale and cucumbers. You can have as much of that as you want.
Yeah, kale is so soothing. I mean, every time I eat kale, I kind of hear violins. It's crazy.
So that's an interesting, I'm just listening to you guys talk, and it's interesting the use of language. So like food is bad, like, but then you're saying, but food can regulate. So
yeah, again, I don't like the words good and bad. I want to use the words, what is working and what is not working. Right? If I'm eating too much ice cream, tubs of ice cream, that's not working for me. Right? It might be regulating in that moment, but in that moment, 10 minutes later, I'm going to be back in the same dysregulated place. Right? So looking for healthy ways to do it is really an important piece, and it works to do healthier ways. Is it bad to eat ice cream? No.
If it's bad, I don't want to be good.
I know. Yeah. Amen.
It is harder though when you're responsible for another human and you're trying to navigate that and be like not wanting to put, body, I mean, gosh, the whole body dysmorphia thing is already such a minefield, but also trying to coach and help find ways to cope that are not going to have negative and without having negative back end consequences.
Right. Without shaming.
Are you going to regret eating 30 tubs of ice cream? Yeah, you probably are. And you're setting yourself up for this pattern that's not going to be helpful in your life, but doing it in a way that's not shaming, like you said, or not putting it in the camp of like, you don't want to be fat. It's just like, this is not a healthy behavior. And it's not, it doesn't have anything to do with what you look like. It's being a parent is stupid. So hard. Yeah.
It is really hard. And I like to use the term growth. Now that's really fun, I'm sure. But like growth is actually an important piece of the work that we do as parents. Okay. We are growing, and you are allowed to make mistakes with a growth mindset, right? If I make mistakes and I say to myself, I am growing, then I don't have to shame myself for the 30 tubs of ice cream. I can say, you know what, that's not working, and I need to learn a different strategy or deal with my emotions. Why am I dysregulated? I'm in pain. I need to be able to look at the pain in a safe place.
That's amazing.
And be able to talk about and deal with the pain. Right.
So we talked about the 2-month-old. We're going to skip from older kids to the wee ones. We have a lot of parents who have very, very small children, or even they're pregnant when their spouse dies or their partner dies. And for the most part, they feel like their infants and their toddlers are basically skipped over, and that people tell them over and over and over that, we're going to have to make another appointment because we're not even close. They feel like over and over and over that their little children's grief is dismissed and says it does not exist. So, I mean, talking about what we were talking about with the first 2 months, we can throw that out the window, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. And even in the womb, right, is that a child, and this is something that this book that called What Happened to You talks about, is the vibrations of being in the womb and hearing your mother's heartbeat, right? And being exposed also to her grief, right? All of those grief hormones, stress hormones, right? So I've done some work on this myself, is that my mom had a baby die. She was 7 months along, and he died because, I mean, now they would save those babies, but this was in the 70s and they couldn't save him. And so he died after being alive 2 days. Well, she got pregnant with me about 4 or 5 months later, right? And I've actually done some work on that because I have had, again, some experiences of her grief, right? Yeah. So, really it does. I mean, those things do affect our children, and they feel the vibrations of our grief. Again, it's not bad or wrong to feel that, or that our kids feel that. That's part of their life experience. However, we want to acknowledge that, be aware of that, and create support for them too.
Is there any way to help treat, quote unquote, or process grief when a child is so small that they don't even realize what's happening to them? I mean, it feels like a lot of times it's like, well, you're going to have to process that when you're older. Or are there ways that people can look for signs that the little child is grieving, and ways to deal with that when they're so young?
Well, and this is the tough part, because really, does a parent who is grieving have the capacity to do that for the child, right? And that's, again, why we get a circle of support, right? Because what that child needs is to know they're safe, and to have their brains are still going to develop. They're going to develop that limbic system, but you may have to have help to do that.
So how young is appropriate to have them do some sort of professional or group therapy?
Well, I've done as young as 2, right? But I think that you could do younger, but have the parent, I mean, again, the parent has to be with them and has to be prepared. The parent has to work on their own stuff. That's what I would recommend for infants.
Okay.
The parent works on their own grief. They work on decreasing their distress and regulating their internal system. And as they do that and become regulated themselves, they'll provide regulation for their child, right? And if they can't provide regulation for their child, which is okay, they need help. They need help to provide that regulation, right? So those are some of the best things that parents can do in those situations, is, get the support for the child to help the child develop that attachment and those appropriate things, and help them relax and regulate.
Interesting.
Man, you're like the wise wizard of life on all of this stuff.
Wizard of therapy.
Kyndel, thank you so much for being here today. We have so much more that we want to talk to you about, and hope that you'll join us on an upcoming episode so we can finish some of those questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
it's been so fun, you guys.
That's what we aim. We aim to please and to have fun while we talk about the horrible things. So
yes.
Join us. We're going to get into some of the more middle-aged children.
Yeah.
The 40-year-old children.
The 40-year-old.
50-year-old children. No, kind of the classic, what you would define as a child. We're going to ask Kyndel the questions about those kids in our upcoming episode with her. So keep your eyes out for that. Remember to check out the Widow Wives Club. Answer all of the questions. If you're having difficulties with that, send us an email at widowwedonow@gmail.com. Also check out our Patreon, patreon.com/WWDN.
If you want to buy us a taco, it's buymeacoffee.com/widowwedonow.
And until we can talk to Kyndel again and get her wise wizarding, I'm Anita.
I'm Mel.
And I'm Kyndel.
And we're 2 young widows and 1 therapist who's solving all of our problems.
Woo-hoo!
Dumbledore.
Figure out. Widow, we do now.
This is my favorite thing to discuss with you.
Tell me, what is it?
One of my favorite things. I do enjoy tacos and cheese and dogs. This is about how you cannot pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars for a phone plan, especially when you're a widow, your person is dead, you might have kids, You might need another option, and you just want your phone to work. You want unlimited texting and service, and you want it to be like $25 a month.
It blows my mind that they have plans that start at $15 a month. That is so cheap. And the cool thing is it uses other 5G networks, and so you don't have to pay extra for that, and you still get great service.
Yep, Anita and I have traveled all over, and I have used my phone. So I highly recommend it. And my mom's even on it. When my dad died, we put his phone down to the cheapest plan, which is $15 a month. And I think my mom's on the $20 a month plan, and it's so worth it. It's so much cheaper than what we were all paying before. So I highly recommend it if you're on a budget or not. Who cares? Ryan Reynolds is in charge of the company, and they send you free stickers with Ryan Reynolds temporary tattoos. It's kind of the best. So if somebody wants to sign up, what can they do, Anita?
Go to trymintmobile.com/WWDN. Seriously, you guys, such a great idea. Save yourself some money.
And if you're worried about losing data or having any changes with your phone, not going to happen. They walk you through it. Everything's fine. It's the easiest process of all time. Again, that's
trymintmobile.com/WWDN.